Welcome to It's Not Just Business Talks with Sonja, where we get down to the real business of how great leaders dug through their own trenches and climbed some epic mountains to get where they are today. Now let's get started with the show.
I'm here today with Nathan Bettger, board-certified hospital chaplain and spiritual director from Oshkosh, Wisconsin, where he lives with his wife, Kat, his two sons, Brendan, Arthur, and Owen Rain, his Welsh Terrier, Wendell, and Brendan's service dog, Harley, which we're going to talk about Harley too. He received his master's in divinity from Bethel Seminary in St. Paul, Minnesota, and certificates of spiritual formation and spiritual direction from George Fox Seminary in Portland, Oregon. Nathan served on the founding board for the men's spirituality nonprofit, Illumin, and is a graduate scholar of the Orphan Wisdom School led by teacher, storyteller, and author Stephen Jenkinson. There's a lot packed in there, Nathan. I'm excited to unpack it. How are you, my friend? It's great to see you.
It's good to see you. Good to be with you.
Beautiful smile. I'll just preface this by saying I've known you for many years and I've been a great fan and friend, especially a follower of your bees and your boys. Those are my two favorite things in your world half the time. But the reason why we connected today is because you just have an enormous story and I have lots of questions, as always. I've always been the one that asks a lot. And the first thing I just want to dive into, because you have a service dog named Harley, who I have not yet met. Tell us a little bit about why you have a service dog for your son.
Yeah. So we have a service dog because Brendan, my oldest, who's 10, has a form of muscular dystrophy called Duchenne. And he is in a power wheelchair. The dog is there to help him with things, really. He's not able to walk, and in fact is going in for surgery just this next week.
Oh my.
For some surgery on his tendons and his ankle. So Harley came to be with us about a month ago from a nonprofit called Can Do Canines in Minnesota. It's just been remarkable. She's fantastic. So.
Is it sort of what kind of work does Harley do? Like, is like a fetch, like a comfort, like what sort of?
Right. So she's trained to be a mobility assist dog, which means so she came to us at 2.5. Mm-hmm. She did all of her. This is what Can Do Canines does. They train dogs working with prisons in Minnesota, where the dogs live for the first 2 years, and then for like the last 6 months, 3 to 6 months, they'll stay at the facility and work with specialized trainers specifically for clients. So Harley's been trained to do things like hit handicap buttons on doors.
Oh wow!
When they're going, so he doesn't have to reach for them. She will get things that he drops and deliver them to his lap, which is extra helpful because things like pen caps or pieces of paper or even like a phone or a remote, she'll pick that up and give it to him. She can open and close doors. We have little tug ropes on our doors or on the refrigerator, so she can open and close the refrigerator. She can get help. So like if he's on the other side of the house and he says, Harley, get help, she'll run to find one of us and bump us in the leg or do whatever she needs to do to get our attention to go back to him.
Incredible.
So,
the reason why I brought Harley up first, Nathan, is because I've known Brendan since he was barely walking and just toddling around. And I recall the day that you and Kat made sort of the discovery / announcement that he had been diagnosed with Duchenne. And I remember feeling a lot about that as a parent myself and just imagining what you two must be feeling at that time. And that's why I brought him up first, because you work in an environment where people are grieving, and you yourself must have, I'm making the assumption, experienced some sort of grief or shock when you discovered that Brendan was going to be, moving into at some point a wheelchair and, lose some of his capabilities. How did you handle that personally as a father? And yeah.
Wow. I mean, the first 6 months are a blur. When I let people know, I had written a few blog posts in reflection, ready to put them out on my website, and shared it on Facebook, knowing the tragedy and the devastation. Well, I felt it, obviously, but I called it collective heartbreak because it was such an energetic outpouring. And I knew that these people who cared so deeply for us were also going to be heartbroken by this information, because many people knew Brendan.
Yeah.
We were all in the same boat. We didn't know anything was quote unquote wrong with him or his genetic code. And so it was a real shock for us. Ironically, just like a few weeks after finding out about Brendan, I was going to, I think, the first of 4 teaching sessions with Stephen Jenkinson up in Canada. And Stephen had come into my life as a teacher about grief and death and dying and numerous other things. And I was like completely raw, completely heartbroken going into this. And I had went to talk to Stephen about this. And, he talks to a lot of people, so I think he was a little bit suspicious that I was like wanting to talk to him after one of his sessions. And when I told him about my son, I just like broke down.
Yeah.
And I my son's got this diagnosis. It's really not good. And I know that we've got this time. Like, I know that they're doing research and all these things. And he kind of like cut me off, and he was like, you know what? Stop with the hopeful shit. And he's like, because it's not gonna help you in this. And I wrote about this on my site. It's pretty powerful writing there. But he said, what is my work to do now is to be a part of making meaning of all this, for him, for us, and for our community. And that's been something that has really stuck with me as I've attempted to verbalize and articulate what it means to be heartbroken, and what it means to be grieving, and what it means to live with a conscious awareness of frailty in our current condition as reality. Something that is not necessarily welcome
right
in our world whatsoever. So,
and yet it's part of our everyday existence that we sort of try to ward off.
Yeah.
But so how so you wrote blogs as part of your processing of information, creating meaning. And how many years has this been now? It's been quite a while.
Yeah, maybe like 5.
And so is it a daily, so is there some part of you that do you feel found or made meaning out of it? Or is that still a daily, are there still daily waves of sadness, or has there been some sort of, people always say grief has these stages, and I understand that there are people say, it's anger and bargaining and but that's for some memes on Facebook. What's it really like?
When I used to lead grief groups before COVID hit, and when I talk about the stages, it requires some education for people, because the stages are given as like this kind of neat and tidy way of talking about
exactly.
Well, first you're in denial,
Yep.
then you're angry, and then you try and bargain. And Elizabeth Kubler-Ross specifically did research on people who had received a terminal diagnosis. So it wasn't for family members grieving anyone. It wasn't for like long-term grief. And it wasn't meant to be like a subsequent series of stages, but that's what they've taken because it's easy, because it's packageable, because you can make a
you can put a meme, you can put it on Facebook, and everyone can go, yeah.
So I tell people that bargaining is as much of a stage as I can't get up in the morning stage, or anger is as much of a stage as I can only eat chips today stage. Like these are Netflix is it for me today stage. Like it ebbs and flows, and sometimes we experience these things simultaneously. For me, there's like, and yeah, it's like a daily constant reminder of uncertainty, of the fact that my life is not normal, and what the heck is normal anyway? Like, but little things, Brendan can't really roll over very well in bed. So in the middle of the night, sometimes multiple times a night, I hear from his room, Daddy. And then I have to like fly out of bed and run in there. And it's like his legs dangling off the bed, or he needs some water. And one would think I might get used to something like that, or that I have a great attitude about it. But every day I get reminded, okay, like this isn't gonna change. It's only gonna get more, more needs. This is what I'm gonna be dealing with, Dad, or help, or whatever, for the rest of my or his life. So that brings on all kinds of levels of grief, sadness, challenges to accept, frustration.
And I hate you mentioned that Stephen said cut the hope stuff, but is the only other option, because for me, looking in from the outside, it feels like, when something's going to just be this way, or it's not going to change, or like it feels hopeless. So how do you cut the hope stuff then, and just live in that space of hopelessness, if that's really where you live?
Yeah, I try not to take away people's hope, because it took me a long time to get to this place. It's something that Stephen Jenkinson talks about often. And growing up in the Christian church and being a hopeful person, I didn't want to give up hope. But if we cling to hope, then we also cling to the other end of the spectrum, which is hopelessness. And we find ourselves in the middle of that. It has to be either or. So
right. That's what I was asking.
Yeah. So letting go of the spectrum entirely and being more hope free is something that I try to aspire to.
That's interesting.
And if someone's hopeful, fine. Like, not gonna say don't be hopeful. However, working in the hospital, working with tons of people with terminal diagnoses and no way out scenarios, I've seen what hope does to people and their ability to be present.
Can you tell me about that?
To be present to the pain and the difficulty and the potential making meaning of the very present moment, which is the only thing that is real, which is the only thing that transforms us. The future is not real because it hasn't happened yet. It can't be real. It can't be. But if all of our attention is somewhere in the future on something that's not real, then what does that say about our ability to really attend to what needs to be attended to right now? So I'm always trying to come back more into the present and to hold whatever is going to happen loosely. I think I do have a certain resistance to thinking about the future too much because I know that, and we should know this for all of us. The future holds horrible heartbreak and potential tragedy and all kinds of things that we really don't want to think about. And so I do kind of resist thinking about it, but I recognize it's coming. And rather than like saying, no, I will not think about it, or I'm going to hope that I don't have to deal with it. I'm just going to think and focus on the present. And what I try, how I've tried to reframe it is to trust what I have, what I've been given up to this point, what there is to draw from in the here and now, and to live in a present focused trust, not denying that bad things bad, not denying that challenging and difficult things will come my way.
Does Brendan feel that way? Does he understand that? Does he have hope, or does he exist in this sort of present type of space?
He's 10, and he hasn't got a lot of like future talk from his parents. Now, he and his younger brother are dreamers, so sure, they like have ideas about how they want to, who's going to have family and kids, and Owen's going to live in his basement, and they're going to be scientists or researchers or whatever, work for Legos. Like, they can't help but have dreams about the future. All of us do. I have dreams about the future.
Sure.
But it's different than us trying to put on them like a certainty about the future. Oh, do this and everything will work out fine. Or like,
so
that's,
I mean, this is because the whole thing, first of all, it's such a, I don't want to use the word taboo, but I don't have a better word off the top of my head. Nobody wants to discuss death, dying, illness, accidents, future, heartache, break. All of those are the things that we just don't discuss because there's no joy. Not popular.
Right.
That being said, it's not a day or a week goes by where I don't hear from or relate to someone who's having any number of, they're older or they have, how it goes. And so you're sort of forced to, I welcome it because I believe in leaning in to pain as well as I I'm with you, Nathan. I like to lean into the present moment and all that it has to offer, including the heartbreak. But there's nothing I'm more terrified of. Oh, I don't want Todd to die, or I don't want my dog to die, or I don't want anything terrible to happen. Just, of course I don't.
Yeah, why would we?
So it's hard to lean in because it's as if we're inviting oh my gosh. But in your world, so pivoting a little bit to your work, you are in a space where you have some clients or patients that are at a terminal, have a terminal diagnosis. But are you exposed to, let's just say, the ER, and there's a horrific car accident and the family's been called and this person only has a few minutes to live? Are you in those environments as well?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So sudden shock and grief where people, that wasn't what they woke up thinking was going to happen today, which is a different type of preparation, I think, than the sort of a terminal sort of, you've got 3 months or a year, this sort of shock. Does it differ, or is the feelings, are all those feelings, I'll just preface this by saying I have someone in my family that died from cancer, so I was able to observe them through the process and through, of course, their passing. And there's some sort of preparation. It doesn't make it easier. It's just sort of like a feeling of like you're doing some of the grieving ahead of time a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
processing it a little bit ahead of time.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good observation. Many of the grief feelings and experiences are similar if people can see the death coming. I'm going to speak to that. Like if people see the death coming a few months off, they get to process those grief feelings with the person while they're alive.
Yeah.
If it's sudden or unexpected, and some would say there's no such thing as sudden death, like we should expect it. But if it's a surprise, then they have to process those feelings without the person there. However, just because the person is there with them doesn't mean that they're processing, because that person who's dying very well may not know how to die, and may not know how to include their loved ones in the process, which is the tragedy. People don't know how to go through dying together, and they don't know how to respond to death together very well.
Is that something that you do with those people, is walk them through the how to dying? I mean, because we don't. I mean, doulas come into our lives, for both ends of the spectrum. My good friend Beth Patterson, that you know very well, has been a huge inspiration to me about just the birthing process, the death process. For a lot of people, death happens once, everybody, and unless they come back and they do it a couple of times. And for women, however many children and birth process they go through, but it's essentially a rare occasion, and we're not prepared deeply unless we've witnessed and been around it quite a bit, like you have. So, what are some of the ways that you help a person who is in the process of dying do that with their family, or how do you nudge that?
Probably the most radical and surprising thing that I share with people is this. I believe that a death has ripples throughout all generations. We don't know how to die unless we've seen other people do it before.
Right.
But every single person dies. And I've never had anyone tell me that this doesn't happen. And that is that when a person comes to their final days, or when they start thinking about death, they always think about the people who died before them. Almost always. Because what other context do we have?
Right.
None. Nobody comes back and tells us what it's like afterwards. So we only know by what we've seen in our life.
Mm-hmm.
So what does that mean for somebody when all that they've seen in their life are people dying withdrawn, angry,
Mm-hmm.
resentful, closed off, keeping it private? It means a whole huge gaping mystery
Exactly.
for every single person. Nobody's gotten anything from those deaths that were closed off. But if someone has seen a death that is where someone is surrounded by loved ones, where they get a chance to express their care, and they're saying it's okay, good send-offs, emotion, they realize, oh, okay, like someone can die being surrounded by their loved ones,
Yep.
and very well loved, and it's not a lonely experience.
Yeah.
So I tell every single person who I get a chance to talk to about it, look, how you do this is going to impact every single person that is watching you.
Yeah.
This is your legacy. Because nobody else might have anything in common with you for the rest of their life, except for the fact that they will die and they will remember how you die when it's their turn. So you want to like feel bad about leaving your wife behind? She feels bad about it too. She doesn't want to die alone, but you are helping her when it is her turn by how you do this. You know?
Mm-hmm.
So tell her what it's like. Tell your kids what's happening. Get them close.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll say that to the kids or the wife. Ask what it's like. Learn everything you can from this experience. So I'll say that to people, but for someone who's dying, it's not so easy to just like give the spiel like I just did, because at any point in everything I just said, there could be moments of resistance and like, yeah, I don't want to think about that. So,
and it's not that if you had a stoic or reserved life through the course of your actual living, it seems to me it's not that likely that you'll suddenly be the most open and generous with your words on your deathbed. So there is going to, the people aren't necessarily going to have these monumental shifts.
They don't.
So, and that is with the people that we know. And I mean, by that, I also say, I'm not young, but I am young. Sorry. I'm not as young as I used to be. And there are people in my life that are in their late 70s, early 80s, late 80s. I mean, I've got family, and that they haven't been diagnosed with any terminal illness except for age. Eventually will, and you start thinking about that even now. Even now that, even though you may have another 20 years, there's that realization that this beloved person will not be there indefinitely. And that's a form of probably my age person's grief as well, preparing for generational shifts that we all probably go through. We all share that, because we all have somebody that's older than us in our life.
I mean, it's possible for it to be an ongoing reality for us, which is why I think death is so important.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we don't get life from life. We get life from things dying. Like that is the literal.
Such a great point, Nathan.
That's the literal biological reality that we live in. Things have to die in order for life to be, in order for life to happen.
Yeah.
And so if people are afraid of death and they push it back as much as they can. Yeah. And sometimes people say they're not afraid of death, but they are pushing it back by simple, sort of easy to palate easy to digest beliefs that they don't know.
Mm-hmm.
They're just trying to reconcile with the ending,
Mm-hmm.
the permanent ending.
It's that permanent, yeah.
This is what culture and religion is all about, like trying to reconcile with mystery and unknown and endings and all those things. But it's possible to live with the reality of things dying and things that we love dying and grief as a normal thing.
Mm-hmm.
Just depends on how we talk to kids. It just depends on how we talk to each other and our kids.
And there are
You know?
cultures that celebrate death as a great, like the sort of like the pinnacle of, you did it, woo! And so it is. There's a little bit of framing for sure that goes on with that. I do want to, because I want to be mindful of time, but I really want to get back to one thing that I had was that the sudden death, where people aren't able to grieve with the person because for whatever, they had a car accident, or it wasn't, as you said, sudden, because we should all expect it, but it was surprising. It didn't occur at the time that we would envision that person leaving. And if they don't have the opportunity to do that with the person, or if it's a terminal diagnosis and the person's closed and reserved, how do you help those folks do that work when they can't do it with the other, if the other's not willing or is no longer alive?
Yeah. I think this helps people lean into it when it comes around again. And I tell people, grief is not something that you can fix or move on from, because as soon as you get over this, the next one's coming right down the road, It's a fundamental understanding that just because something is sad and hard doesn't make it bad. Let's stop with the notion that because something challenges us, hurts us, causes us pain, that it's necessarily bad. That's a Western culture type of thing.
Really?
Let's be comfortable all the time.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous. If someone was always taking pain meds and then they would never know, like if they burnt their finger, they'd probably get an infection and their finger would fall off. Like people try and numb pain because all pain and discomfort is bad. And so I try and give people tools or some sense of possibility in their awareness that they can lean into this and that it might be beneficial for them. Yeah.
I agree. And it is this is not my specialty, obviously, so I'll just speak from my own personal thought or experience around it. Is for some people have been exposed to traumatic experiences, so not death necessarily, but near-death experiences where the trauma is so real or feels so imminent that it creates post-traumatic stress disorder, and subsequently leaning into pain is very hard because it's sort of a triggering event of, it's not the same as, I was giving this example. If you're walking along the road and a big semi truck comes hauling by, makes big noise, and it's for a second you sort of jump off the side of the road and you have that sort of rush of adrenaline, and then it just sort of subsides because that's a sort of normal like undulation of a scary event. But if you've been repeatedly exposed to something like that, you might not have the reset afterwards, so you're a bit overwhelmed. So for those people, it can be quite hard to lean into pain, because pain actually looks like a really big, bottomless pit, rather than, oh, that was just a semi that went by. So
Right.
that's a challenging one because unfortunately, I think in Western culture, even more so than others, precisely for that reason, we're medicating our pain, and pain is not okay. We have a large mental health challenge in our country around pain. A lot of people right now, especially just through COVID. So it's hard. I always try to find this balance between leaning in to the present moment and all that it has to offer, good and bad, right? So the pleasure, the pain, the joy, the sad, all of those things that are all part of the human condition experience. If you can't lean into the pain, is what I'm saying, is you also can't lean into the joy as much, right? But you can't lean into the present.
Right. There's there's a lot of things that I would say. First, quickly, I think that we learn how to love more deeply when we know how to grieve. We don't love something because it's going to be with us forever. The flower is not precious because it's going to be there forever. That's a plastic flower. Like, how great is that?
Yeah.
We love it because it's temporary and because we have to say goodbye to it eventually. And so oftentimes I do encourage, like, try and remind people that love and grief go hand in hand. And I'm not the only one who would ascribe to that.
Yeah.
The repeated traumas and the repeated pain, oftentimes, which is something that has been done to us, that leaves people ridiculously traumatized, is horribly heartbreaking and unjust, and difficult. Sometimes just perpetuated by the mental health field. Now, I'm not a mental health therapist or counselor or psychiatrist or anything like that, and so I recognize that it's difficult. Though James Hillman wrote a book that was titled 100 Years of Psychotherapy and the World is Still Getting Worse, or something like that. But growth, transformation doesn't happen on its own. It takes work. Some people have to work harder than other people. Some people have to work harder because their life has been amazing. And some people have to work harder because their life has been horrible and horrifying. So, ritual and ceremony and really good therapist oftentimes are needed. But people don't get to a place of wisdom or insight or maturity without working for it.
Agreed.
And yeah, some people, their ability to work is simply taken away because someone has said, well, this is the problem. This is what you have going on. It's this diagnosis. And then they're like, oh shit, that's my diagnosis. Like, I guess I can't change that. I'm done. Give me some meds.
Here's my meds. Yeah. No.
And then they're dependent on the mental health industry to keep them going and keep them functioning. Not saying that there are not those who need that. However, it's more complicated.
I understand. I don't want to take the mental health tack with you're not and I'm not. However, we're both exposed to we're exposed to life, and life is full of who can. I always say to Todd, name one perfect person, and also the other one is name one good king. We're looking at power, especially what's going on right now, and And you know what? There isn't. We are all a mixed bag of different things, and there's a ton of freedom in knowing that we're not, what there's no
I think the thing that I would hold to, and this doesn't have to be a mental health thing, in order to grow in our life, in order to prepare for something like death, in order to live in the reality of frailty, we have to work. We have to work at it. And part of that fundamental requirement is to entertain the possibility that not everything that hurts is bad.
I love it.
No.
Not everything that hurts is bad is 100% a door that we can all walk through.
Mm-hmm.
I know that it's a hard door to walk through, but I can attest to it.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Well, Nathan, thank you. This conversation could go on, and probably will go. We'll probably have to have a follow-up on it, because one of the things that should not be a mystery is death and grief. It happens to everybody. And yet it is, like you said, shrouded in mystery and apprehension, and I don't want to deal with that until my time, and making it more part of life. Bringing death into life is kind of,
Well, I mean, we can affirm what is a mystery, and we can recognize what doesn't have to be a mystery. That's the thing. But if people don't do the critical work of being honest about that, then they're not going to be able to be present to it.
Yeah. Well, Nathan, I'm going to do our closing credit to you, and I'm saying here that we've been talking to Nathan Bettger, board certified hospital chaplain and spiritual director from Oshkosh, Wisconsin. Nathan, where can people learn more about you if they want to find out who you are and what you're up to?
So I have a website, natebettger.com, and I imagine you can link to that in the notes. And a lot of things that I've written are there, both on Duchenne, on COVID reality, on grief, and death. And also information on my spiritual direction practice, where it's really my privilege and honor to be able to walk alongside people and process these things and support them for a long period of time in that challenge.
I love that. Thank you. And I will say that I've experienced that with you, and I appreciated that journey. In fact, I will just close by saying, I think I walked into your room for the first time and just burst into tears. And that's all I did for the first hour. So I remember you holding that space for me. I didn't even have words yet. I just needed to open up, and you opened up.
And that was 12 years ago.
That was 12 years ago. There's been a lot of work since then, my friend.
Oh, I've been crying.
Thanks for listening to It's Not Just Business Talks with Sonja, a real-life podcast to inspire you. We'll see you again next time, and if this is your jam, click subscribe to get future episodes.